Well, thank you very much for the privilege of being here. To Paul and Janet and Nick and Rhoda, I appreciate the privilege of being able to be in partnership with you. And to the people of God, I've been really blessed today in being able to share with you. I'm just going to show you 4 photographs of Dubai. I go to Dubai every year and have been doing so for 5 years. And I'll be going back again next year, end of January and all of February, and going to Qatar and Kuwait and Sharjah as well. There are 7 emirates in the Middle East, and this is just showing you Dubai. Now, Dubai is a city that's been built by foreigners. It couldn't have happened without Australians and Americans and English people. Of course, it's been financed by Arab oil and all of the sort of taxes that they have in getting people into Dubai, and it's now really one of the hubs of the world because most of the airlines go to Dubai. The buildings are often quite extraordinary, and you know, there are some very, very famous buildings over there, and a lot of money has been spent on them. It's a place, it's not as strict as Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is a very, very strict Muslim country. Dubai is a little bit more liberal. They would call themselves a benevolent dictatorship. Nevertheless, having said that, if you're driving a car along the streets of Dubai and you hit someone, it's the driver that goes to jail. Whether it's your fault or not, you have to go to jail. And you have to pay $50,000 in compensation to the injured person. And you're not allowed out of jail until that happens. So it's people have asked me on a number of occasions would I like to drive over there, and I don't want to have anything to do with it because it is extremely dangerous if something like that happens. For Christian ministry, you're not allowed to give out any literature. All the literature is downstairs. I couldn't get that through customs to begin with, but if I was to hand it out, I would be asked to either leave the country or I would be put in jail. So that's the restrictions on Christian literature and Christian ministry. But the church is allowed to meet in Dubai, and it can meet behind closed doors. And many of the churches are very, very strong. I usually go with the Christian assemblies or with the Pentecostal ministries, and it's quite common for a congregation to be 400, 500 people. And it really is a very blessed time. Now look, so that's just a little bit of a photo of one of the buildings there. Let's have a look at the next one, which is a 7-star hotel. It's received an international award. It's if you were to stay in the top floor, it would cost you $10,000 per night, and if you were to stay downstairs at the bottom, it would be $1,000 per night. It won an international award. Roger Federer has actually played tennis on the top, right on the top of this building. And Kylie Minogue and all those sorts of people stay in this building. It's really a celebrity sort of a building. And the part sticking out at the front there, that's a helipad. And then there's something very, very interesting about this building, because you can just see a part of it, but there is a cross on this building. And you can see the crossbar of the cross. Actually, that's a conference room there. But you see how it's sort of shaped like a sail. And so when it was being built, all the authorities thought, well, this is the mast of the sail, because it just looks like a yacht, like a sail. But in fact, it is a cross. And it's a Christian cross, because the architect was a Christian man. I mean, it's a brilliant scheme, really, because everybody thought it was a must. But now that stands in an Islamic country in Dubai. Of course, when it was opened, they wanted to get rid of the cross, but they found that the cross was attached to the building in such a way that the whole building would have to come down. How about that? I mean, that was well thought out, wasn't it? And so if you're going along the road in a taxi or in a car, you can actually see very, very clearly that that is a Christian cross. And it stands there today in Dubai. What happened to the architect? They deported him and he's never allowed to get back into the country again. He certainly has. So it's quite a testimony, because they don't want the cross in an Islamic country, but it's there. Now the next photo to show you. Now this is just one of the congregations that I was able to minister to. You can see that they're mainly made up of Indian people. Some of them are Filipino congregations, but mainly Indians are over there in Dubai. The holy day is on Friday. That's the Islamic holy day. So the only day off that you get from work is Friday. So the Christian church usually meets on a Friday for the breaking of bread. And then they will sometimes have midweek meetings. This is a Thursday night and it's a gospel meeting. And why I took this photo is because this was taken about 10 minutes to 7, and at 7 o'clock it was absolutely jam-packed with people, because they had bussed in people who do the labouring jobs in Dubai. These are the people where their passports are taken from them, and they're virtually slaves in the country. And it's a tragic situation, but this is one of the Christian churches that's actually reaching out to those people, and they bus them in to a gospel service on a Thursday night. Look, the Christian churches are very, very strong. They're allowed to meet in a building behind a closed door. And their social life is pretty much zero, because they don't feel comfortable walking around the streets, particularly the women. And so they tend to spend a lot of time in their units, and the men go to work, and they work 6 days a week. And so the churches provide meetings during the week, Monday night, Tuesday night, and so on. I was at a prayer meeting on a Tuesday night and there were 200 people there. I was at a testimony meeting on a Wednesday night, 250 people giving their testimonies. And then gospel meeting Thursday night. Friday is the day of communion, and Saturday night they have things for the children. It's like an anniversary, a Sunday school anniversary. We used to have it once a year, didn't we? They have it every week. So it's just a way of getting together. The children sing, and they love to do that, and the parents are there, and the whole church comes together, and that happens on a Saturday night. Then they work Sunday, and then Sunday night they'll often come together after work, where they have an 8 o'clock service until 9:30. Now the church is very strong in Dubai. There's a complex of buildings that I go to. It has 11 buildings in it. It's used every day of the week. And there are 23 congregations trying to get into that complex of buildings. So they have to hire conference rooms in hotels to meet as Christian congregations. There's an Anglican church in Sharjah, just near Dubai. It's a very evangelical Anglican church. It has 96 congregations using their building every week. Wow. Quite an extraordinary thing is happening. So it's a blessed thing, and you have to ask yourself, why is it that the Christian church does so well when there's a certain amount of restrictions upon it and suppression, even the possibility of persecution? It's very interesting. Now the last one to show you. This is the world's tallest building. It's 823 metres high. You can't take a photo of it any time of the day without the glare of the sun sort of hitting you in the eye. It's office buildings, and it's also own your own units. It cost $6 billion to build, and it's quite a spectacular building. And Saudi Arabia is building another one that's going to be 1 kilometre high. And these buildings are built on the desert, so they have to go a long way down. And it's very tempting to call it the Tower of Babel. But I tried hard to behave myself in that way. So there's Dubai for you, the Middle East. There's a lot of wonderful things happening for the Lord in the Middle East. There are a lot of Arabic people coming to the Lord through visions, which is quite interesting. They are experiencing a real special revelation of the Lord and coming to know Jesus. So hundreds and hundreds of them are coming to know the Lord. Well, thank you that I could share that with you. I was going to share with you now from Luke chapter 15. Luke chapter 15. I've been going to Dubai for 5 years each year, and going back again next year, God willing. It's taken me all of that time really to learn a little bit about their culture and the type of people that they are. Makes me realise, what missionaries go through and what happens when you're trying to learn the various aspects of how people live in a different country. It takes a lot of patience, takes a lot of wisdom, and a lot of prayer. I came to understand Arabic people best when I realised that they have a great reluctance to accept personal responsibility. They try to avoid it at all costs. And sometimes it's a very, very subtle thing. For example, if you had a glass in your hand and you dropped it and it smashed, you would say, I dropped the glass and I'll try and replace it for you. That would be a fairly normal thing to say. An Arabic person would say, the glass dropped out of my hand. Now it's very subtle, but it's a way of trying to avoid personal responsibility. So you're going to the train, it's 10:27. You've got to get the train, you've got to get to the station there. And you get there and you see the train pulling out of the station, and you say to your friends, I got to the station but I was too late, and I got there as the train was pulling out. An Arabic person would say, I got to the station and the train pulled out. Very, very subtle, but just an indication of how they find it difficult to acknowledge fault within themselves. Now you will find that in these stories of Jesus in Luke chapter 15, because they are Eastern or Middle Eastern stories, and you will find that coming through in the stories. Luke 15 and verse 3, then Jesus told them this parable. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Does he not leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Very interesting story, this, because it relates really to many different situations, and it particularly relates to the church. Because in the church, if we've got 100 people and we lose one person, we rationalise it. And we say, well, we're very, very sad about losing that person, and we might give them a ring and we might ask them what's been going on and so on, and we might make some attempts. But at the end of the day, we will say we've got 99 people in the church and we need to look after them. And that is how we sort of rationalise the way we might have lost someone. Can you see here what Jesus is talking about? You know, the one has been lost, and so the shepherd needs to go out and find this one lost sheep. Very, very powerful ministry here. Because it's an expression of God's amazing grace. How that the 99 are really left out there in the open fields. The mind boggles about what happens to them. But this one sheep is so important to the Lord. So very, very important. And who is this one sheep? It's you and it's me. And who is the shepherd? The shepherd is Jesus. And that's how much he cares for us and how much he loves for us. And when he finds the sheep, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. I find this an interesting little insight because, you know, to carry a sheep is very, very difficult. You've got to put it over your shoulders and you hang on to both legs, putting them together, and then you walk home. And that wouldn't be easy. It would be a very difficult, and you know, you need to be very strong to be able to do that. It's a little insight, isn't it, to the masculinity of Jesus. One of the things that's happening in Australia is that men are not going to church. And it is suggested that that's got a little bit to the fact that it doesn't attract men, and that, if you like, the church has become very, very feminine. Here is a very, very strong imagery of the masculinity of Jesus. And then verse 8. Suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Does she not light a lamp, sweep the house and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbours together and says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost coin." Now, an Eastern home, a Middle Eastern home at this particular time that Jesus is telling the story, would have been a fairly one-room, large room with a stairway going up to the top, to the rooftop. That's where it was given a little bit of, you know, coolness to sit there during the evening. And usually no windows in the room, so to get some light into the room, you would have to open the door and light a lamp. It could have been, almost certainly was, an earthen floor. Very, very difficult to find a coin. But this lady had to find this coin because this coin was part of her family's budget, part of keeping the family going. She had to find it. She couldn't afford just to let it go. Unlike we, who, if we lose $5 or $10, we wouldn't spend a lot of time in trying to find it. We might spend a few minutes. We would let it go after a while and say, look, it's not worth trying to find this money because I'm spending 2 or 3 hours on something and it's causing sacrifices in other ways. Again, we sort of rationalise our losses. This woman has to find this coin. And she does, and then rejoices with the finding of her lost coin. Once again, this gives us an insight into the persistence of the Lord for our souls, for our hearts, and for our lives. The persistence of God, the hound of God, who chases after us and does not want to let us go, does not want to lose us, and is not prepared to just sort of treat it as an economic thing. which is what happens today in so many decisions in our nations. It's always about the economics of it. The Lord's not about the economics of your soul, of your life, and of your ministry. He's prepared to put everything into it to see you through. And then verse 11. This is one of the most famous stories in all of history. In all of world literature, this is one of the most famous stories in the world. The story of the two lost sons, the lost sons, the man who had two sons. Verse 11, there was a man who had two sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Now this is just like saying, I would rather you be dead. In fact, I wish you had died so that I could get my money. It's a very, very potent expression of someone who doesn't care about his father, and all he wants is the money now. Not worried about what happens to his father. So his father divided the property between the two boys. Now we have to ask the question, why did the father do that? Because those of us who are fathers, we know that there are certain times with our parenthood where we have to exercise what we call tough love, where we say that there are some things that we just cannot give to you because we don't think that it's best for you at this time, for you to do that. And we would call that love that is firm. Why didn't God exercise tough love in this story? Because this is a story about the Lord. This is a story about us. Why didn't he show tough love? Because he didn't want to lose him. It's all about it's the theme of loss and lost in all of these three stories. The Lord does not want to lose us. And so he provided the inheritance with his younger son, really against our better judgment. And he would know too, the Lord would know too, the insight of the younger son. The father would know that the younger son would squander it. I mean, I've got two children. I've got a son who's very, very good with money. He manages money very, very well. And if I ever do pass on any money to him, I know I'll get it back. But I have a daughter. That's different altogether. It's taken her 35 years to learn to manage money. The Lord would have known, the father would have known that this younger son would have squandered his inheritance, and yet he still gave it. It's a deep expression of this overwhelming love for his people. It also shows it's a dysfunctional family. This is a dysfunctional family right here. This is a family that's not working together very well, because the eldest son, it was his responsibility to come between the father and the son and to bring reconciliation. Because that's the job of the eldest son in Eastern families, Middle Eastern families. You know this. You know that sometimes we've heard stories of the eldest son actually killing someone in the family who's become a Christian. And the reason for that is because for the honour of the family. They do that for family honour. So therefore, the eldest son in a Middle Eastern family has a very big responsibility. And in this family, the eldest son does not step in to bring about any sort of harmony whatsoever. He's actually allowing this to happen, which probably suggests that there wasn't very much good harmony between elder brother and elder son. They weren't getting on very well at all. And the elder son would have certainly regarded his younger brother as a no-hoper. And he would have known what was going to happen to the money. Verse 13, not long after that, the younger son got together all he had. He set off for a distant country and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. The most humiliating thing that a Jewish man could ever do, because the Jews hate pigs, hate pork, despise pork. The very thought of having to work with pigs would have been totally humiliating. Not only that, he would have longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. He became a very, very friendless person. Verse 17, when he came to his senses, incredible thought, isn't it? When he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired men have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned. Now there's that statement right there. I realise that I have sinned. I realise that I am at fault. I realise that I have done wrong. And all that's happened to me has been due to my behaviour. This is something that Jesus is giving this story to an audience that is trying to avoid responsibility. It would have come as a tremendous shock to them. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. He got that right, didn't he? You not only sin against your parents, but we sin against God. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men. So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him and kissed him. Very, very interesting verse, this one. Arabic men do not run. You will find that there's very, very few people in the Olympic Games from the Arabic countries. They don't run. And there's a reason for this. That is because they wear tunics from the neck right down to their ankles. And if they were to run, they would trip and they would fall over. So they don't run. So if they were to run, they would have to hitch up their tunic and somehow put it around a belt if they had a belt, and they don't usually have a belt, or maybe inside some underwear. But mostly they would hitch it up and they would hold on to it with their hands and they would run down the street. And that's exactly what this father would have done. And as he would have been running down the street to greet his son, people in the village would have been laughing their heads off at him, because this is something that doesn't happen. It would have shown he had bow-legged, he would have been bow-legged, but they would have been laughing at him because he had white legs. And that's why an Arabic person doesn't run like in that way too, because they are mocked and they are laughed at. An Arabic person doesn't like to be humiliated. They're very, very sensitive. And this is something an Arabic man would not do. So what's happening here? This is telling us that our God our Lord Jesus Christ, is willing to be laughed at because he loves you and he loves me. He's willing to put up with the humiliation of it. He's willing to put up with all of that mocking going on. And as he's running down, he's saying, I don't care about you. I just care about this one person. This my son, you and me. So actually it's the theme of the cross, isn't it? This open humiliation, this open mockery, this open laughing. It's right here in this story, the story of the cross. And so he runs down and he greets his son and he kisses him, which is something they don't normally do. They embrace and kiss on both sides of the cheeks, but that's all. It's sort of usually fairly formal. He comes down and he embraces his son and kisses him. And he shows compassion for him. He's filled with compassion. Look, I don't know how you get on with forgiveness, but I find myself able to verbally forgive as a Christian. I'm always happy to verbally forgive people. Say, I forgive you, I accept your apology, and I'm happy to forgive you. But sometimes I find my heart takes a while to catch up with my mouth. And sometimes it might take a month or a few more months, and sometimes even longer than that. And yet I think that I'm a mature Christian, and I think that I've done such a good thing to forgive. But then I find out I haven't forgiven at all. And it's something that I have to be constantly in prayer about with the Lord, that I would be able to do that which Jesus wants me to do, not only verbally, but also in truth. Here the Lord shows great compassion for his son. Verse 21, the son said to him, Father, I have sinned. I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his feet and sandals on his feet. Bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. I mean, he's been clothed with the righteousness of God, the righteousness of our Lord. In place of all of that condemnation and all of that failure and those terrible mistakes that he's made. It's a wonderful story, isn't it, of God's love and God's goodness. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. Your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has him back safe and sound. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. The older brother's very, very interesting, and we are rather sympathetic towards him, really, aren't we? We're very, very sympathetic towards him because he's a dutiful brother, a dutiful son. He does the right thing. He's always on time. He does the job. And there's never any worries about him because he's a good boy. He goes out there and he does the work, comes home at night. He's never a problem to the father. We have a lot of sympathy with him. But what is the problem? Well, he's very dutiful and he does the right thing. And he goes through all of these sort of good manners that, any good son would be proud of. But the trouble is, he's also very mean. He's a very mean person. He's a very self-centred person. He's a very selfish person. And he's a person that will not forgive his brother. Who is this person? It could be the church. Jesus is certainly talking to the Pharisees, no doubt about that. But this could be the church. This could be us individually, where we're not prepared to forgive someone who has wronged us, or we can clearly see has wronged others. So, verse 21, but he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill a fattened calf for him. So, my son, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and he is found. And there was rejoicing by so many people of the son that had come back. But what's interesting about the story is Jesus doesn't tell us whether the older son ever went back into the hall. Did he remain outside? We don't know. He should have been inside because he was the elder son. That was his duty. That was part of his obligation. That was part of his responsibility, because the father was the host, but the elder son was responsible for all of the logistics of the party. He was supposed to be in there. And because it was a village situation where everyone was sort of related to each other, the people in the hall, in the great room, having the celebration, they'd have kept their eyes very much on what was going on. And they would have wanted to know whether the elder son was going to come in and do his duty. They would have been watching very, very carefully what the father would do, because the father had been publicly humiliated by the elder son not going into the hall to do what he was supposed to do. They would have watched him very carefully. And so they saw him go out of the hall and go to the elder son and invite him to come in. Everybody knew what was going on. Everybody knew what was happening, because it was a small village situation. We don't know whether he came in, but then we don't know, do we, whether the church is willing to make that change to be more compassionate, more generous, more caring, and more kind to each other. That is the great challenge for the church, and it's the great challenge for us individually as Christian people, that we would not be like this elder son who is so unforgiving and so lacking in generosity. Well, thank you that I was able to share that with you, and thank you very much for your attention, and pray that this will have the Lord's blessing upon it because of his word. Amen.